How many times have you heard somebody say, you know what, I'm going to sleep on it, and then they wake up in the morning with clarity? They don't know where they've been or what's happened, but they all of a sudden have clarity. We are recharging much more than our physical bodies when we sleep. That's our clairvoyant vision coming. But clairaudience is when you would hear a thought that would come to you that's not yours. It could be the voice of a loved one who has crossed. It could be guidance you might hear from what I'd refer to as a spirit guide. Other people would call a guardian angel, telling you yes or no or to do something. And then they'll ignore it or dismiss it because it's so weird or it doesn't fit this materialistic paradigm. This is clear knowing. It's when you all of a sudden have this just download of absolute knowing or information, and there's no way you could logically explain how you know it.
Hey everyone, I've got some huge news to share with you. In the last 90 days, 79.4% of our audience came from viewers and listeners that are not subscribed to this channel. There's research that shows that if you want to create a habit, make it easy to access. By hitting the subscribe button, you're creating a habit of learning how to be happier, healthier, and more healed. This would also mean the absolute world to me and help us make better, bigger, brighter content for you and the world. Subscribe right now.
The #1 health and wellness podcast.
Jay Shetty.
Jay Shetty.
The one, the only Jay Shetty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose. I'm so grateful that you come back every single week to become happier, healthier, and more healed. And today's guest is someone that I've been wanting to have in this seat for a long, long time. I've been a big fan of her books, her work. We have a lot of mutual friends in common who couldn't stop talking about how incredible she is. And finally, I get to sit down with her. I'm talking about Laura Lynn Jackson, the author of these two incredible books, The Light Between Us and Signs, The Secret Language of the Universe. If you haven't read these books, I highly recommend you grab a copy right now. I'm so excited to talk to Laura Lynn Jackson. Laura, welcome to On Purpose.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here in this space with you.
Honestly, I mean it when I say that I love it when a friend says to me, Jay, I really think you need to have this person on your show, and I know them and we're friends, and everyone speaks just so highly of you, your work, of course. Being exposed to your books was a gift to me. So thank you for doing the work that you do. And thank you for making time today, making space and energy to be here with me too.
I'm so honored to be here. And I love that. I find that, light seeks light, and there are circles of friends that come together and I think expand our own connections, right? It's so beautiful, those chords of connection that happen.
Absolutely. Well, Laura, I think today is going to be both educational and enlightening for all of us. And so I want to make sure that we really explain things to people if they're new to the ideas. And then I also want to kind of get lost with you because I have so many things that I want to ask and kind of co-create together. And so my first question is that you're both a psychic and a medium. Could you explain for our listeners and viewers what that means and what the similarities or differences are so that anyone who's learning for the first time is brought up to speed?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to understand what that is. Being psychic and reading psychically really means that I am tuning into and reading what would be called an aura or an energy field that each one of us has. Scientists call it a biofield. People in my industry call it an aura. And really within that energy field is all sorts of information. Information about a person's past, present, future. I will see chords of connection between people here to people they love who are part of their lives. I'll see sometimes something I call soul cycles for the person I'm reading for when I'm reading psychically, which looks like a timeline, a historical timeline with lines drawn down. But the lines that are drawn down are important moments on that person's life journey, decisions they've made, people they've met, decisions that have found them that they had to have the courage to say yes to and open the door to, and so forth. I might also see a soul cycle where they were locked into a certain time period of learning. Let's say from age 19 to 23, I'll see a soul cycle there. And it can be very interesting too when it has to do with somebody's past soul cycles, because a lot of times in lives I think we lose perspective and might feel stuck. Like, I was stuck there, or I was stuck in that thing and I couldn't make a shift or a change. But meanwhile, that was a period that they were meant to be locked into a certain soul cycle or lesson of learning. Maybe it was for them. Maybe they were the catalyst for somebody else to learn. So it can be really interesting in that sense. I'll see soul cycles that are coming from them for them as well. I'll see people in colors, which is a whole language of energy and meaning to me. I can see the maybe gifts they came here with, some of the soul challenges they were meant to face, and what comes next. So all of that I categorize under reading psychically. Being a medium is very different. When I read mediumistically, what I'm really doing is I'm connecting with the consciousness or the energy of someone who's no longer in a physical body. And for me, that experience is very different. When I read psychically, I like to say I'm retrieving information. I'll reach out or I'll look. And when I read mediumistically, I just sit back and I receive information. Mm-hmm. It's very much, for me, like meeting all new people, and personalities come through and information comes through. It's a very interesting experience for me too, because when I read psychically, I get this inner screen that kind of shows up in my third eye, inner mind. Kind of looks like a widescreen TV or like a movie theater screen. And all my psychic information always comes on the left-hand side, and all my mediumship always comes on the right. So it's very easy for me to tell when I'm switching gears, when I'm getting information psychically versus mediumistically. When I read mediumistically, what will happen for me is I'll see a point of light come in on my screen. And depending on where it comes in on my screen, can have a good sense of whom I'm speaking with. The upper right-hand side is reserved for anybody who I'm reading who I would refer to as a sitter, for the sitter's mother's side of the family, anybody who's crossed there. The bottom right is reserved for anybody on the sitter's father's side of the family. And then the middle's for everyone else, peers, friends, extended family, pets. Anybody else can come in the middle. So for me, there are two very different ways of receiving information energetically. One is retrieving it or looking, and one is receiving it from consciousness outside of a physical body.
Beautifully explained. Thank you so much. That's so useful. And when I was listening to you, I was thinking, is that something that you're doing, for example, when you're reading psychically, is that something that you're doing at all times and it's happening all around you? Or is that something that you consciously, specifically have to sit down and perform a certain practice to do that? For example, do people come in front of you like I am now going, like we do around dentists, we're like, don't look at my teeth because they feel, you feel being judged. Are you reading all the time, or is this a specific practice that has to take place?
That's such a great question. Psychically, in terms of psychically reading, I always have my volume switch on, probably around a 3 or so. I can never shut that off. So I'm always receiving information in a way that we might not be used to, right? We're living in this materialistic paradigm of a world, and we're taught we have 5 senses, but I'm always reading energy, and it's very helpful for me. It helps me navigate my world and my life. I would never purposely psychically peek at anybody's energy. To me, that's very disrespectful. Everybody's energy is sacred, and it'd be like peeking at somebody's underwear to see what color they're wearing. I would never do that without permission, agreed upon. Could I do it? I suppose I could, and maybe in my, teens and early 20s, I maybe didn't honor it the right way, and I would kind of look and see what I could find out about somebody by reading psychically, but it's not something I'd ever do now. I think we all have psychic abilities, and for some, it's more pronounced than others, but I think people use them more than they know to navigate their worlds, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a gift we all have. It's there for the taking, but I do think we need to be respectful of it. So no, I would never purposely psychically read for somebody unless it was agreed upon. To me, that's a sacred thing. Mediumistically, though, that's a very different story. I keep my mediumship abilities closed like a bank vault unless I am actively sitting down to read someone. And the reason for that really is because I could read psychically constantly and I'll never get drained. If I were a cell phone, after 24 hours of always being on psychically, I may be at an 89% and then I go to sleep, right? Mediumistically, if I read for an hour, 2 hours, I go from being 100% to a 2%. And it's an energy thing. I can feel it. And if I overdo it or I try to push my limits by reading mediumistically a lot, I'll get physically ill. So I've learned to keep that door shut. But the psychic stuff always stays on. It does.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad now I can relax. But no, it's good to know that. And I think there are a couple of things that I want to dive into in a moment. You mentioned two really fascinating things, and everyone who's listening, I will get to them. You said that we all have psychic abilities, so we will talk about that. I'm fascinated by that. You also talked about how you can read energy and you think it's useful to be able to do that. We'll get back to that. I want to start with, you just mentioned your teens and your 20s. You've been doing this a long time. When did you discover these abilities? What is that process of discovery like from I have a sense to, oh, this is a skill? And what does that journey look like through, when did you discover it? And then how do you turn a discovery into a distinct ability, which is what it is today?
I love that you're making the distinction between discovering something and then really honoring it and working to create it into a skill that can help others, right? So I think I was psychic since being a child. I would see people in colors. I would very quickly understand if somebody had this kind of blue aura to them that day. I could get along with them. It'd be great. If they had red, frazzly energy, I'd avoid them. I would feel what other people were feeling. That's called being an empath. But it never occurred to me that other people didn't experience that too. I thought that's how that life worked that way. That's how the world worked. But about age 11, I realized there was something what I'd label as wrong with me or very different about me, and I wasn't happy about it. When I was 11 years old, I remember it was a hot August day. I was swimming in my swimming pool, and my mother called out to tell me she was going to go visit my grandparents. They lived about an hour away, and we'd see them, every other weekend. And I was seized by this absolute moment of, it felt like panic and knowing at the same time that I needed to go be there with my grandfather that day. I'm soaking wet in the swimming pool, and I'm like, Mom, you have to wait for me. And she's like, Laura, are you kidding me? It's like school starts in a week. This is your last dog days of summer. You're in the swimming pool, really? And I was like, I need to come with you. My brother and sister were in the pool too. They didn't get that psychic download, so they stayed and swam. Quickly changed, went to my grandparents' house, and I had the most magnificent day with my grandfather. It was just the two of us. We were laughing and joking, and he was such a beautiful force of love in my childhood, such an important person in my soul. And when it was time to leave, I remember hugging him and saying goodbye and that I loved him. And that was the last time I ever saw him alive. 3 days later, he was diagnosed with advanced leukemia, was sent straight to the hospital, and he died within 2 weeks. And in those days, unless you were 16 years old, you couldn't go visit someone in the hospital. So none of us got to go see him. And I remember being really haunted by that knowing, because what I quickly realized is what I had felt in the pool that day, that download of absolute knowing, was that I knew I needed to go be with him, and that I knew on some very deep spiritual level that this was my last time seeing him and that he was going to cross. And so I remember, pretty quickly confessing to my mother and saying to her, Mom, I think there's something really wrong with me. I think that I am, maybe cursed or like dark or broken or haunted, because, people are not supposed to know when people they love so much are going to die, right? And she said to me, oh, Laura, and I don't know what I did this lifetime to get the mother I did, because she's just extraordinary. She said to me, Laura, no part of you is broken or dark or haunted. You just have an extra ability, is all. And then she confessed that this ability had run in our family for generations. My grandmother used to have dreams that somebody would die and wake up and find out they had died at that exact time of her dream. When my aunt was younger, right around age 11, the phone rang at my grandparents' house, and my aunt blurted out, oh, it's Germany calling to say that my uncle's died. And she didn't even know she had a distant uncle there. Sure enough, it was relatives in Germany calling to say that my grandmother's brother had crossed. And, at the time, she was told, we're never speaking about this again. It was something that was kind of hidden. But I think in that moment, my mom gave me permission by telling me no part of me was dark or broken or cursed, and that I was meant to embrace this. So then I was like, great, I have this ability. I'm part of this club that I wasn't sure I was happy to be part of, but I was part of. But what was I meant to do with it? And I definitely did not treat it as respectfully as I should growing up. It was a very handy tool in bars to hit on guys and read who I'd be a good energy match with. And I remember, one of my boyfriends I walked up to and I was like, so your name starts with a J, your dad's on the other side, you have a 7-year-old brother. But I told him all this stuff about him. He's like, are you a stalker? And I'm like, no, I'm just psychic. It's just normal.
How did that go?
Right? Well, we dated for like 2 years
Oh, wow.
until I was like, that relationship had run its course, It was a beautiful growing thing, but meant to move on, as oftentimes relationships are.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to recognize that, this was an ability I could use to help people. And I remember one of my sorority sisters in college was really stressed and really upset about graduation, to the point where she couldn't think about anything else because she had been dating this boyfriend and she didn't know what the future held. And so, all my friends knew I had these abilities. So she came over to my house one day and I sat down and I did what would be called a reading for her. I said, you know what, you're going to end up marrying your husband. You're going to have 3 kids. And I could just feel her energy changing. And that did all come true. She did get married, had 3 kids, all of that. But I could feel like her sense of peace inside calming. And I realized this is something I really am meant to honor and share with others. It's not for me. It's not for me to know certain things and that sort of thing. It's really to share with the world. And it took me a while to really honor it in the right ways. And then my journey led me to want to help people in grief. And I spent 20 years as a high school English teacher, and I did this in secret. And I tested for an organization called for the Forever Family Foundation in 2005, where I had to go to a hotel room, and there were people set up at different stations. I had to just give them readings, and they couldn't say a word. They just had to score me. But if you passed, you could help people in grief. And I really wanted to help parents who had lost children volunteer, right? And so I passed their tests, and that's when I think I really started honoring this in the right and most respectful way. And I would just volunteer a lot, and I'd go on grief retreats, and I'd help connect people here on earth with their loved ones who had crossed, and also teach them that they didn't need me in order to do that. And that's when I think it really became much more of a skill. And then I wanted to work with scientists as well, because I think this field is so disrespected. I get it, it's certainly woo-woo. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of the top universities have had these psi labs, these labs that explore psychic abilities. Princeton had one, Harvard's developing one, UVA still has one. But a lot of times the academics don't want to go near this, right? So I think it's very important that I work with scientists and that I volunteer to be tested to find out how this ability works for me and how we can all access this. So my journey definitely led me to that. And I think the more you practice anything, the better you get. If I were to pick up a violin and then practice every single day and utilize that skill and ability every single day, I'd get pretty good at it. And so for me, I am never separated from the other side and what I do. And so I do think in time I came to understand that it was a gift that I was meant to share with others, that I'm really here, I think, as a teacher more than anything, to teach people how to access this part of themselves and connect with it, because you can transform your life. It can become so much more beautiful and meaningful and all of those things. So that's the long story of how I got to where I am today.
Well, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned science there, and I wanted to touch on, you actually had scientists put EEG scanners on your brain, right? Like
Yes.
they actually looked into, what did they find was different or interesting or unique?
That was fascinating to me. So what they found is that, number one, my brain does not look normal from the start. They did a recording of just what's called like a baseline brainwave level, right? Before I start to read psychically or mediumistically. And it was 97.5 consistent with how the brainwave activity of someone who had suffered traumatic brain injury brainwave activity would be. But my brain is intact and it's not damaged. So there's something a little anomalous about my brain to begin with. When I go into psychic mode and mediumship mode, my brain looks different in both ways. How I said that when I read psychically, I see things on the left-hand screen, and when I read mediumistically, it's on the right. Well, what they found in my brain is that, our optic fields crisscross. And so when I would be reading psychically, my brainwave activity would show that I was seeing something from the left-hand side when I was reading psychically. And when I was reading mediumistically, it would do the opposite. It would show this optic nerve would light up, showing that I was seeing something that wasn't there. That was one thing. The other thing was that my brain wave patterns looked very similar to, interestingly, monks when they meditate. I kind of blew out their charts too in terms of measuring my brain waves are usually between, I want to say, let's say 0 to 60, and mine were at 120, 160 at points. My brain races, it does some interesting thing. But the most important thing they found is that when I go into psychic and mediumship mode, my brain wave activity in my frontal lobe, which really stretches from about here to here, silences. It looks like I'm comatose. The brain wave activity just goes down and different parts of my brain start lighting up. The most distinct thing seems to be like the back right-hand side. And that area of the brain, it's where part of different lobes intersect, has been noticed and noted to have a lot of brain wave activity in people who have had brain damage that kind of shifts their sense of self out of themselves to being connected to all things and causes them to become very empathetic. So my brain wave pattern that as well, where I just get into this super connected, empathetic state when I read, which I can verify. What I love about reading is, day to day, I'm driving in traffic and somebody cuts me off. I'm going to get annoyed. I'm going to have a hard time having unconditional love for that person. But the minute I read for somebody, if I have a session with somebody, I feel unconditional love for that person for the rest of my life. There is some magical chord of energy and connection and beauty and light and love that happens when I go into someone's energy like that. That can't be undone. And it is such a gift for me every time just to feel unconditional love for people. It's just amazing. And so that seems to be what my brain shows I'm doing as well, going into this really deep meditative state of empathy and connection and love.
That's so beautiful to hear that. And it's almost like that idea of when you study or understand someone's history, when you gain context on their experience, when you learn why they are the way they are. And I guess through your experience, you're learning that in the most intimate way. It gives you such a different perspective to look at them through. And I'm glad you mentioned there the science around monks' brains. I remember interviewing Matthew Ricard, who's dubbed the world's happiest man, because when they scanned his brain, they found the most presence of happiness, learning, and being in the moment. And those were the 3 signs they looked at for sparking joy or happiness. But you mentioned there earlier that you see yourself as a teacher to help people get better at this and to almost get better at sensing energy. And you've obviously always been able to do that. And it's really interesting when you describe it in the way you do, because I feel I'm good at sensing energy, not in a psychic ability way, but in a personal navigation of the world way. And that is such a strength and so useful for friendships, for work. And it's really interesting because sometimes I'll sense it, but I'll still go against it too. And I think a lot of us who are unpracticed would say that we do that as well. But let's start with the psychic abilities you think we all have that we use, but we're not aware of. What would you say they are?
I find it so funny that you just said, well, I'm reading energy, but it's not psychic. It absolutely is psychic. I think the word psychic is such like this word nobody wants to touch these days.
Oh, no, I meant more as in I'm not skilled and trained
No, but you are. But I also think the word psychic for many people is such like a oof, like I don't want to go near that. The history of the word, right, is so wrought in like fraud and like you picture just like a neon sign and that sort of thing. But I think we are all psychic. And by that, I mean, we're all energy readers. And I think it is a skill that some people are better at than they realize, like expert level. Like, honestly, Jay, I think you're an expert level energy reader. I really do. And I don't necessarily think you think of yourself that way, but I think you're just using it in the most fluid and beautiful way to guide you to the people you're meant to connect to, maybe things you're supposed to say no to and avoid, whatever that may be. I love that you brought up the studies on
Matthew Ricard.
Yeah. I remember reading that chapter in your book and saying, oh my gosh, this is so similar, because one of the ways they measure happiness, right, is by looking at gamma rays increasing. And so that was something really interesting when I do readings too. My gamma rays go off the charts. Here's the thing. We all have that ability. You know, what the scientists have told me is that there seems to be some sort of switch in my brain that I just know where it is, and it's also very easy for me to turn on and off. But we all have that switch. I think we're all born very psychic and very connected to the place we came from, to one another. And before we have formal language, we're just reading energy. We're reading the energy of all things, and that's how we navigate our world. Then what happens? Well, usually between around age 5 to 7, we start formal schooling and we get very locked into the frontal lobe of our brain, because here's what the frontal lobe's in charge of: analytical thinking, critical thinking, math skills, language skills, all the day-to-day stuff we need. And when we come to school, we learn and we just get stuck and tracked in that part of our brain. So it's really just reintroducing ourselves to that pathway back into our knowings, our deep connection with what I call the other side, with energy, with understanding how to access it. And the most important thing is learning to honor it. One thing you said is like, I'll get these, knowings, or I'll read the energy, but sometimes I go against it. That's so true for all of us. There are so many different ways we might get information psychically. I always talk about our psychic toolbox that we're born with and will never leave us. We just have to learn to reaccess. I call it the 4 clairs. There's clairvoyance, which means clear seeing. And that's like, when you sleep at night and you dream and your physical eyes are closed, but you are vividly seeing, that's our clairvoyant eye, right? That what other cultures have called the third eye, having your third eye open. It's the same thing that I see when I'm reading and I'm watching my screen, but everybody has access to it and every single person uses it every night. Interestingly enough, too, the only time that our frontal lobe goes offline is when we sleep. So every night we have this incredible opportunity to connect spiritually. How many times have you heard somebody say, you know what, I'm going to sleep on it, and then they wake up in the morning with clarity? They don't know where they've been or what's happened, but they all of a sudden have clarity. We are recharging much more than our physical bodies when we sleep. But clairvoyance is definitely one of the abilities. And I've heard a lot that people who practice yoga, when they will be doing yoga poses, will all of a sudden get flash images in what they call their mind's eye. That's our clairvoyant vision coming. Clairaudience is another one. It means clear hearing, and it's when you hear a thought that's not yours. We all have subtext going on in our minds every day, our own personal narratives, the stories we're telling ourselves about our own lives. And that's a whole other discussion about how to shift that into the positive and how important our thought energy is. But clairaudience is when you would hear a thought that would come to you that's not yours. It could be the voice of a loved one who has crossed. It could be guidance you might hear from what I'd refer to as a spirit guide. Other people would call a guardian angel, telling you yes or no or to do something. It's very rare, but some people, will have those moments of clairaudience and then they'll ignore it or dismiss it because it's so weird or it doesn't fit this materialistic paradigm. There is claircognizance, which most people have and can identify this. This is clear knowing. It's when you all of a sudden have this just download of absolute knowing or information, and there's no way you could logically explain how you know it. Maybe you're driving and you're like, I'm not going to take the short way home. I'm going to take the long way home today. And you do it, you honor it, you get home to find out that there was some accident that closed down the road you wouldn't have known about. Claircognizant knowings can happen when you meet people like, I know I'm meant to know that person or be on their path, or maybe I'm not. It can be about switching careers. It can be about moving. A lot of times when we get claircognizant knowings, they're counterintuitive. So we'll argue and we'll like wrestle with it, with what, meditation teachers call that frontal lobe, which is the monkey mind that chatters and chatters, right? And so we'll wrestle with it and try and reject that. But it's so important to, I think, honor our claircognizant knowings. And then the one that everybody has, but some people's volume switches are at like a 1 or a 0 and other people's are at a 10, is clairsentience. And clairsentience means clear feeling. It's all about reading energy. It takes place right in our solar plexus area. We actually can feel energy there, which is a lot of reasons when people say, oh, I have such a strong gut feeling on that. It's because they're being cognizant of that feeling they're having in their stomach and their solar plexus area of reading energy. So, that can be such an incredible tool when we meet people for the first time. We don't just meet them in the 3D, we meet their energy, and we're going to get an instant read on it. And people who are very open clairsentiently and have purposely open to that, right? They will feel one of 3 things. They will either feel neutral, like, okay, this person's okay. We're just kind of passing each other in the stream of energy in life. Or they might feel what I call an allergic reaction of the person, which is less about judgment and more about not my cup of tea, not on my highest path, I need to avoid. Or, and this is interesting when it happens, you might feel this magnet pulled to the person that you just can't explain how you know it. Like, I need to know you. I need to be your friend. We have a shared journey to get, whatever it might be. And, that might prompt you to do some things that might be a little awkward by today's, day and age. Like when I've met people that I've known have been put here to be, let's say, one of my closest friends, I have literally gone up to them in very awkward ways. When I was 13, I went up to this girl, Gwen, and I was like, hi, I'm Laura, and we're meant to be friends this lifetime. And she's still one of my closest friends decades later, right? I did it with another friend, Stephanie. Like, I'll just have these knowings, but it's not just unique to me. We all have them. I think it's so important to trust our clairsentient pulls. The other gift of being clairsentient is you can feel the energy of places. So when you travel, you feel the patina that's there. And when you see art or experience art, you're diving into that in this beautiful way. So those are the abilities. That's the psychic toolbox that's available to all of us. We just have to be reminded of the pathway to get back to that, because we couldn't be separated from that if we tried.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. And that's so clear as well. I love the way you've laid out our psychic toolkit, and it resonates. I was listening to you and thinking, I've often said, when people have said to me, like, why do you think you've been able to do certain things that are considered risky or difficult at different times? And I've always said, because I started listening to my inner voice when I was 14. And when I was 14, it was really loud. And I remember, and as you're talking about school, I remember school was developing and my parents were guiding me into subject matters. I think the first thing I ever heard my inner voice really clearly say was, don't study the stuff your parents want you to study. Like, you don't need to work on those things. There's something else for you. And I'm sure there was a voice before that day as well, but that's when I remember it being really confident and strong and loud. And that's when I decided I would do art and design and philosophy and things like that I was passionate about, as opposed to science and math and things that my parents wanted me to do. And it was such a big decision at the time. Looking back, it feels like such a small decision, but actually it was huge, because the real decision making that was happening was not what subject to study, but whether to listen to the inner voice or the outer voices. And that was the real decision I was making. And I feel that ever since that age, that inner voice has just got louder and louder and louder.
Oh, wow.
So today it's really hard to ignore it because it's so strong. And so when I joined the monastery, it was the inner voice. When I left the monastery, it was the inner voice. When I tried to pursue this path that I'm on right now, is the inner voice. And even till this day, I just have to find, it's what you said though, I have to still keep reconnecting back to it, because it's so easy for it to get made weaker, just as easy it is to strengthen. And it's just like that muscle. I'm either tuned in or I'm tuned out. And there are plenty of weeks that can go by where I feel disconnected, and then you have to reconnect. So while you were talking, there were so many parts of it that I was like, oh yeah, I've done that subconsciously, or I've done that sometimes consciously. And even when you were saying a sense of knowing, it's really interesting to me. There are people in my life today in the same way that I have gone up to and said exactly what you just said, where I said, we're going to be friends. And I've been friends with them for years and years and years. And they find it funny as well now. And they've started doing it with other people that they feel connected to, because they saw that I wasn't scared or shy of the rejection or the awkwardness or the weirdness that may develop. What do you think you gave a great example there of school and that frontal lobe, which I think is such a great explanation of the activity of the frontal lobe and the focus there. What else do you think has kind of disconnected us from that inner voice, or weakened us and that connection that we have to these psychic abilities?
I want to comment a little bit about some of the things you said that I find so fascinating. The first is you said that you've had this inner voice as like the dominant way that you have been guided in your life. And that is certainly a very spiritual inner voice, right? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about clairaudience, which I have to tell you too, is the rarest of all of them. I meet very few people who are actually cognizant of it and have owned it. So I find that fascinating. I'd love to hear in a little bit too, like, what you think that inner voice is, right? I also find it fascinating that you said that really became very pronounced around age 14 for you.
Yeah.
I have found too that between ages, let's say 11 and 14, usually that time period, our psychic abilities, they kind of reopen and turn on. I think it has to do with like biochemical hormones, how we access our brain, how things are working, right? Where all of a sudden we get a second chance to reopen to them. And I have found if you honor them then and stay open to them, it stays for life. It's really, really wonderful. So that's fascinating. The other thing to me too is I have found that when I have been in the energy of someone I call, someone who's here on what I call a global soul mission, there are certain characteristics I'll see about that person. I'll certainly see their colors in a certain way. And I haven't purposely looked at yours because I haven't had permission to, but what I will tell you is that I do know that you came here on a global soul mission, which means, many people are born into certain families in certain areas, and they're meant to learn every lesson their soul is meant to learn in that little microcosm existence, almost like a little snow globe, right? Because we're really just here to love and be loved. Earth is a school for our souls. And most people will stay within a certain area, certain families, they'll have a certain reach. But every now and then somebody comes here on a global soul mission. And so that was never your your blueprint. You were meant to reach and influence strangers a world away that you will never be able to understand your positive influence. One of the characteristics is that they have that knowing, or it's been announced to them at a younger age. And I feel like what you're describing happened for you at age 14 was really just a characteristic of somebody here on a global soul mission. I love that you've listened. The other thing I wanted to ask you about that is when you've gotten that, like hearing, that inner voice, right? Has it come in a neutral sense of just like an absolute knowing? So when you were told like, you're not going to study that, this is a different path that you're meant to be on, was it like a yay or a oh no, or was it just an absolute calm knowing that was given to you?
I'd say it felt calm but firm.
Right. And then you can react after, right?
It wasn't fearful and it wasn't forceful. It was peaceful but firm.
Yes.
In that it knew
absolute.
The direction. It was absolute. There wasn't, it's almost like there is no other choice. Like, how can there be? Like that kind of knowingness for those decisions that I pointed out, which were like the bigger decisions in life. Kind of like, I especially see it pronounced in what you were saying where, you were saying you go up to people and you sometimes will share like, these are the big events in their life, the big moments. To me, when I look at the biggest events in my life, they were all against the grain. Lots of people disagreed with me, but I just knew inside of me that they were the right decision. And that's how firm but peaceful it was. I didn't need to convince others. I didn't need others to be on my side. I didn't feel like everyone had to understand me. I was like, I get it. It's there. That kind of feeling, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. You're speaking my language. It's so nice to be around somebody who has had the same experiences of what I'd call knowings that I have. And I think we all get. I think it's so important when we have those moments of knowing, whatever they may be, to honor it. And I think that's something that everybody can do in his or her life, right? They can focus on that, they can honor it, and they can act on that. I think our inner world influences the outer world in every way, right? And so it's our relationship with ourselves, the narrative we have in our own mind of what we're telling ourselves about our journeys and our importance here in terms of helping others and being kind and loving and forgiving and all of that that matters. But it's also the information we're receiving. I believe that we all have a team of light. I wasn't raised with any certain beliefs. I was raised Lutheran, and my first concept of God was an old white man with a white beard and a white robe who was all about love. But I very quickly began to, I think, evolve beyond that just because of the experiences I was having and the readings I was doing and the information I was getting. And so I very quickly began to understand that, I absolutely believe in God and a higher power. And it is this source of just love and light and connection between all things that is inherent in us. We are part of, we couldn't be separated, and can guide us in the most extraordinary ways into our highest way of being here, right? But then I also began to understand that we each had a team of light, and God was one part of that team of light, and the other part was what I call spirit guides. which throughout time and history, different religions have called guardian angels, this realm of angelic being consciousness, call it whatever you want, that guides us and mentors us. And from what I've come to understand, most of us have between 1 and 3. It's nobody we knew this lifetime. It's just advanced angelic beings that guide us, and a lot of times they will use our 4 clairs to communicate with us and guide us. What's interesting to me is that your team clearly uses clairaudience, which is amazing. Our teams of light will reach us in different ways too. Sometimes in the dream state, we'll have precognitive dreams that guide us, or things of that nature. But we all have that there, whether we have a sense of having spirit guides or not, they're still helping us. Some people get very caught up on like what their guides look at, what are their names. I don't think we need to focus on that. It's really the least complicated relationship we ever have. They're just here to help us. If we ignore them, they just circle back and help us again. And then the third part of our team of light is anybody we loved who has crossed to the other side, pets included, ancestors included. They're part of our soul group too, and they help guide us and do that as well and lead us on our highest paths. And here's the thing, everybody has a team of light. They're there for the taking, to access and help you. And if you've never really dived into your spiritual self, it's never too late. It's just about opening. But I've completely strayed from the question you asked.
It's actually, no, but that's really useful because it helps me ask a better question actually. Genuinely, if let's say, and this is what I hear from a lot of people, and that's why I'm hoping that this conversation is really going to help them. When I talk about that personal experience I had, it's more rare because most people feel they learn to switch off their inner voice at 14.
Yes.
So more people that I speak to, and I'm sure people who are listening and watching to us today would say, Jay, I was taught to turn that off. Like when I rose my voice, or when I was assertive, or when I was firm, or when I felt like I was told to shy away from that, or I was told to fit in, or step in line, or whatever it may be that someone received from their family, parents, friends, whatever it may have been. So I found a lot of people have done the opposite, where they've actually weakened or disconnected from that voice. And now if they're here sitting listening to us right now, they're thinking, I want to get back to that. Like I want to be able to know. I don't want to have to. And that's what I like about your work so much, is because you're telling people you don't need to have a psychic to tell you, or you don't need something external to tell you. You can actually tune in yourself. So I guess my better question is, how do people who disconnected early on reconnect now? Because it's almost like you had a best friend who you stopped talking to, and now you got to pick up the phone back to them, and you're uncomfortable to have that conversation because you haven't talked to them in 30 years and you don't know how it's going to go.
Right. And you're like, is this going to work? And here's the thing, it will absolutely work. I'm really the anti-business model, in the sense that as a psychic medium, I'm like, nobody needs me. Nobody needs to come to me. Let me show you how you can do this yourself, and how you can reaccess this part of yourself that is sacred and so important and so connected and incredible and light-filled, and will lead you on a path of love and help you find your highest path here. How do we do that? It's so easy. It starts with one simple step, which is intention. So you get quiet within yourself and you say, to your team of light, you don't even have to really know who they are yet. You just have to have that sense of being part of something greater than yourself. And you say, okay, I'm all in. Please help open me up. I like to add more to that. And I like to say, use me as a vehicle of love and healing in this world, however I can best be used. Guide me, teach me, show me. And I think that energy, intention of wanting to reconnect with your own abilities, with the other side, to be guided by something greater than yourself, to honor that and hold it sacred for yourself, that intention is everything, because it gives the other side permission to now work with you and reopen. I've had people I love doing workshops, and my favorite part of teaching workshops is watching people see the light of their own being and recognize that they have all these abilities that they swore they didn't. So people will come to, let's say, a one-day workshop, and I'll do these certain activities targeted at getting them to use their clairvoyant vision. So draw something without ever seeing it, or hold an object that somebody else owns and tell me the impressions you get off of it. And they all say, we can't do this. And they feel really foolish. And then they go and they knock it out of the ballpark. And what has then changed within just a few hours is their relationship with themselves, because they can no longer deny that part of themselves. And they no longer can think like, oh, well, I need to go to a psychic medium to get my answers or to gain access to this realm or to find out my purpose or my path or my truth. No, you don't. You need to just honor that part of yourself and be reintroduced to it. And I think there are certain ways we can be that help facilitate that.
Yeah.
Meditation, absolutely. Why? Well, when we meditate, we're going into that part of ourselves. We're reconnecting with that greater part that we're part of, right? It's getting us quiet. It's silencing our own physical kind of materialistic energy. Surrounding yourself with people whose energy you love and who lights you up. Energy is kind of like a lake right at the top. It's like the sun is shining, it's sparkling, it's clear and beautiful. You go down darker, deeper, colder. There's all sorts of slimy things down there. You don't want to be near it. Well, stay with people whose energy is at the top of that lake. There has been research done too that shows that when you are open to the fact that you're connected to something greater than yourself and that these psychic abilities are very real and you can access them, they happen more frequently. And that when you are around people who share those beliefs, it unfolds in tremendous ways. And this has been studied. So just having that belief and being open to it is going to have it happen to you more and more and more. I think then we start to recognize these synchronicities that begin to appear far more frequently, these meaningful coincidences that aren't coincidences at all. Everything that is happening to you is always happening for you. You are always being guided into meeting people, maybe facing a soul challenge that is going to help you grow. Maybe saying something to a stranger or smiling at them and changing their whole day in a way that you couldn't understand. So it's really just about, I think, overcoming two things, fear and then trust, right? We have to overcome the fear of, I don't really have this ability. I can't do this. I need to depend on somebody else to show me how. And this isn't going to happen for me. So many times I will have people say to me, I read signs and I decided I wanted to ask for a sign, but I was so scared that I was going to ask and not get it that it took me 2 weeks to finally do it. And then I got it because they were so afraid that they were going to be foolish in the sense of believing this could be true, trying and then being let down. You will not be let down. Trust in your abilities. So overcome the fear and then trust in it. A lot of times people will have these really amazing moments of connection, psychic connection to something greater, receiving a sign, having a synchronicity, thinking about somebody and then they call, whatever it might be. And they'll be really fearful to share that experience because they're almost fearful to embrace it, but they're also fearful about being laughed at. I can't tell you how many times, especially when my first book came out, people would come to my events or come to my signings. What they really want to talk to me about is they'd want to share an experience that they had that was so magical and sacred and such an incredible connection, right, with somebody they love on the other side or being guided in a certain way. And they came to share it with me because they knew I was a safe place that I wouldn't laugh. And I would always say to them, this is beautiful. Have you told other people about this? And they're like, no, I haven't because I didn't want to get laughed at. But here's what would happen. People would start to share their stories. And instead of being laughed at, the person they said they shared it with would say, oh my gosh, that's incredible. I had a moment like that in my life too. Let me tell you about it. And it would unfold this beautiful, beautiful history of like this magical moment of connection the person had. And that energy is contagious, that light energy, that positivity, that knowing that we are connected to something so much greater than we can even fathom, that we are so much more loved and guided and protected than we can imagine, changes your life. It makes things miraculous. And when you have a mindset of being open to that, of saying, I have these abilities and I'm so excited to explore them and embrace them, send me the people, the books, the situations, the lectures, the shows, the experiences I've met that are going to help foster that in me, you're also connecting and giving permission to your team of light on the other side to help do that for you. I think it's just beautiful and magical when we do that. So nobody needs me. Nobody needs anything prescriptive. All a person needs is the intention that I want to open to this and I'm willing to explore this. My guides have always told me, be open. That's my mantra. Like, be open to what is brought to me, be open to the experiences, to the people, to wherever I'm guided. And then also trust the energy you're picking up on, right? Trust that that's all anybody ever needs to do. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody came here programmed with such unique and special gifts that they were meant to find, honor, and then share with the world, right? And then share with others and help other people do that. That's true power to me. It's when we find what we came here gifted with, we honor it and share it, and we help others rise. I think this materialistic world often sends us the wrong message that power is, this false power, actually, which is power over others, right? Oh, have people envy you or be able to control people or be able to do this. And that's not what power is. Power is helping others find their light and shine it and share it and rise together.
Yeah, I think you brought about two really beautiful points in fear and trust, which is what either blocks us or opens us to these ideas. And I think that what would be really interesting to explore with you is, how do people know the difference between, and maybe what you're answering is somewhat, maybe you don't need to know, but I guess the difference between infatuation and then a deeper frequency connection. So like, we've all had moments where we're like, this is my person, this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And we feel like we know. And either that person doesn't want to be with you, and then you're like, well, no, how can they not? They're my person, I know. Or there's the other side of it where they do want to be with you, but then you get bored or that feeling goes away after a couple of years or maybe even less or more, whatever happened. So I find it's really interesting. Do we need to know the difference between infatuation and a frequency connection, or is the experience of the infatuation part of the journey we're meant to go on anyway?
I love this because we're getting into the topic of love, right? Which is really what we're here for. We're all here to give love and receive love. And any opportunity we have to give that or receive that, that's it. It's that simple. That's the meaning of life, right? But now we get into like romantic love and what does that mean? And we can even go into the concept of soulmates and what are they? But let's stick right now with infatuation, that sort of love, right? It's almost as if a button's been activated in us that's like, this person, pay attention, this is really important. And we can feel this magnet pull to that person. What does that mean? It can be confusing. Well, here's the thing. There is so much going on behind the scenes on this spiritual energy grid that is unseen, right? So your soul and that person's soul may have a soul contract. You might be part of the same group. They may be a soulmate. You may have agreed to be here for a set amount of time, like you spiritually contracted to be together for X amount of time, and then you'll need to re-sign the contract. But at any moment, both of you have free will. Now, here's the thing. We are always at all times a three-part equation. We are spiritual light energy. I mean, that is literally what we are. When scientists look at this too, and they break down your body, like they break down the body systems to the cells, to like the, protons, and they split things apart. What we are just streams of light that behave cohesively to come together to form cells, to form body systems. So we are made of light, right? So we are physical light beings stuck in these physical bodies. It kind of feels like a sausage full of stuff, never feels fully comfortable, right? So that's the two parts. And then the third part, and this is the most important part, our free will. How we steer the ship of our spiritual light soul in our physical body, the choices we make, the decisions we make. That's where it gets tricky with infatuation and love and all those things, right? Because every single person has free will. Sometimes people will meet, one person's soul will kind of have this inner conversation with that person like, whoa, that person, if I want to be with that person, I'm going to have to do the really hard work this lifetime now. I'm going to have to really face my fears. I'm going to have to work hard and grow my soul. I'm going to have to learn about self-sacrifice. I'm going to have to learn about like what it really means to love somebody and to give to somebody without, having conditions. Am I ready for that? One person's soul might be like, I see it, but I'm not ready for that right now. And they'll leave. And so the other person's like, but we're supposed to be together. You're my soulmate. I feel such a connection. They're not wrong, but they can't control the other person's free will. Right? I think also infatuation can be an inner guidance system that leads us to qualities we like and celebrate about others in our lives. So let's say we're infatuated with somebody, but then that relationship doesn't end up working. They're not into us, right? We say, what was that about? Well, number one, we probably read and connect with their energy. But number two, what we can learn and take away from that then is, what qualities did that person have that lit me up? Maybe I need to put, a statement out to my team of light in the universe, like, a manifest, this is what I want in my next partner. Maybe that was meant to show me that. And then, of course, there's infatuation that leads to a much deeper love, right? With these beautiful relationships that grow and grow and grow and are multifaceted, which I think is the most spectacular journey we're all on here, And I think that even within our own beings, we can get infatuated with certain aspects of our own personalities or diving down a rabbit hole, but we're so multifaceted as well. I think in order to truly love someone else, the relationship we need to work on is the one with ourselves, and we need to have self-love and be truthful with ourselves so that we can then bring that energy to others. And so infatuation is it's almost like the hook, the cord that maybe pulls us to someone. But what comes next is the most important part. Is that person's soul ready? Are we both ready to take this on and explore the multifaceted way that love is? The sparkling kind of diamond that love is? Or do we just want to leave it in this kind of, because infatuation's not the highest vibration of love, right? But so do we want to leave it there and just have a fun time and then go our certain ways, and maybe like 3 or 4 years from now we'll find partners where we're ready to do the hard work? It's really an ongoing conversation of energy at all times between people.
What are the different vibrations? If, as you just said there, infatuation is not the highest vibration of love. If there were frequencies and vibrations of love and connection that we can more formulaically understand so that we can decipher. I always say how, to me, trust has 4 levels. Like, I think we start with people at 0. We should start with people. Generally, I start, and this is to not block intuition, but to protect sometimes from infatuation. How when I meet someone, intuitively, if I feel like I can trust them, that's great. But I still want to start with a 0 level of trust, because I want trust to grow over time, as opposed to just expect that this person knows me and I know them.
Yes.
And then I find that there's transactional trust, where I know if I do something for you, you'll do something back. And that's actually not a bad thing. I think we see that as unsexy or uncool. But it's like, it's really good to know that when you do something, someone does something back. And when they do something, you do something back. And then higher than that is reciprocal trust, where I do things for you and you do things for me, but we're not counting, we're not looking. And then there's unconditional trust, which of course is the rarest form. When we look at frequencies, or as you said, vibrations of love, and I love that you said infatuation's a lower form. I'm also intrigued by what happens at the opposite, because I think a lot of people today are on the dating apps, they're going out on dates, they're connecting online, but they're like, Jay, I feel no connection. Like, I'm feeling no energy now. And I think that's becoming more and more common, where people are coming back from dates or even meeting people and they're like, Jay, I just don't feel like anyone has the energy I'm looking for. Where's that coming from? Is that people struggling to express their energy, or is that because you haven't found the right person yet?
There's so much I want to dive into.
Let's do it. Let's dive into all of it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm going to start with the last thing about, let's say somebody is on a dating app or they're going on dates and they're not feeling a connection. Well, I will tell you this. I have done readings before where I've had to say to people, and let's say it's a girl in her early to mid 20s who just really wants to find her soulmate and get married. I remember saying to somebody first, you're going to meet this person in about 3.5 years. I gave the name. They gave it to me. And this is your path. And she was so upset. She said, what do you mean? 3.5 years? I'm just going to waste my time for 3.5 years? What? And I'm like, this is how it is. Well, it turned out, this all came true. This person had been married to somebody else at the time, because he had a soul contract with that person's soul. They were working it out. They finished their soul contract, had grown as much as they could, were meant to be released from that marriage, went on, met this person, and she was meant to be with him. Sometimes if something's not working out for you, it's because the universe is working for you, because your soul and someone else's soul might have a meeting point that's coming up in X amount of time, and you're going to need to be patient. But here's the most important thing. In that time, in what I call the waiting room of like wanting that so badly, waiting for that relationship, If you get to the airport early and your plane's delayed, are you going to sit in the waiting room and stare blankly at the wall and just go into this place of low vibration where you're angry, feeling like the universe is forgetting you, become bitter, you just twiddle your thumbs and you look off and you just stomp around? Or are you going to be like, how can I utilize this time? How can I be creative, or what can I read, or who can I meet? Who am I meant to meet right now? And utilize that time in a positive way. You're going to shift your whole energy. So a lot of times if we're stuck and we're not meeting somebody right now, it's because you're not supposed to meet someone right now. One of two things is usually happening. You're first meant to do your inner work to elevate your own, you can call it a vibration if you want, to get clear and shiny in your own energy, so that level of lake energy I'm saying, you're going to meet all the people on this vibration, not the fish swimming around on that vibration. Because if you have not cleared your energy and gotten clarity and really stepped into your own light energy, you're not going to match with somebody of the same energy. And you can look at just sound and vibration studies of this. If you play a vibration and something else is tuned to a different vibration, it's not going to resonate. If you play the right vibration, it resonates. It's drawn together. People's energy is like that as well. We have to trust in that process. So again, I think we're going back to trust. Because either the narrative we're telling ourselves is, I'm forgotten by the universe, there's no match for me, I'm never going to have love, on some way I must be unlovable, I hate my circumstance, whatever that is. If we're telling ourselves that narrative, we're making that our reality. But if we're telling us a very different narrative, nope, I trust the universe. And I trust that there is a divine path set out for me. And my job is to be open and be able to recognize it when it gets here, and to be patient, but to not be bored, to fill myself up with being vibrantly engaged in life, so that when this comes to me, I'll recognize it and I'll match it. It's telling ourselves a very different story, not one that we're forgotten and we don't matter, but one that we matter in extraordinary ways, and that we are being guided into our highest path, and that there is a relationship waiting for us. And I think that changes everything, right? I think shifting our own vibrations too, will help bring relationships of a higher love level to ourselves. The best thing we can do here is dwell in the currency of gratitude, forgiveness, kindness, and doing things for others. And that can be in a very small way or a big way. If you don't feel like you've got a lot of energy in your tank and the most you can do for others today is smile at a stranger in the store, go do it, because it's going to matter. Every action we do matters. Every thought we have matters. It either puts darkness into the world or it brings light in, right? And so it's about giving back to others. When we get in that frequency of gratitude, love, forgiveness, kindness to others, we are going to match with people of that frequency too. So you know what? If you're in a kind of negative energy space, you don't want to meet somebody right there, because guess what? You're going to meet somebody else in a negative energy space. Be patient. Work on opening yourself. Trust and be guided. Here's the thing. Nobody's in this life alone. We don't come into this world alone, and we don't exit alone, right? We're greeted. We come into this world surrounded by other people. And when we leave, we're greeted by a team of light on the other side. A lot of times our pets will bound up to us, etc. So even when we're here, we're not alone. We're always connected to the other side. And you can ask for help from your team of light. Say, I'm really excited to meet this person or have this love enter my life. Please show me and guide me, and then surrender it. Because doing that is also allowing yourself to understand that you're part of something so much greater than yourself, and that you don't have to micromanage it all. Let's say you're in a relationship right now and it's feeling stale or it's feeling stuck. Well, that's a really good sign that you need to grow and your partner needs to grow. And it's time to dust off the cobwebs and become a better version of yourself. And you don't need to wait for your partner to be the catalyst for that. You can jumpstart it for yourself. You can go start doing things that interest you. Shift from a negative energy space into a positive, because the people we're connected to, it will pull them up as well. And it will help you understand what you're responsible for versus what they're responsible for. So I do think that there are many different facets to all of our love relationships, right? And I definitely think that the highest is unconditional love. It's I think feeling this sense of wanting peace and joy, and for a person to be surrounded by love, independent of your role in any of that. I think feeling unconditional love for somebody is the gift in and of itself. You don't even necessarily need to be unconditionally loved back. When we get to that state within ourselves, we have created this nirvana, this heaven within ourselves, of being in that energy, of feeling that for another person. It's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so interesting. You've mentioned peace so many times, and I feel peace is so underrated.
Yes.
We think of pleasure, we think of joy, we think of happiness, and we don't really think about peace, even though it's such a beautiful place to live and a beautiful way to live. I think if we sat there for a second and we thought about it and we thought, wait, do I want to be peaceful or do I want to be, something else? I think peace would probably win if we really sat and thought about it. If we thought about the best times in our life, it's when we felt peaceful and still. And that's almost the energy that's needed to connect to that. I think the infatuation, I think the initial attraction, that almost comes as an unpeaceful energy. It's kind of impulsive.
That's such a good point.
Right? It's kind of fast.
It gets
it's
your
impulsive.
attention,
It gets
though.
your attention.
Yeah.
But it's not peaceful. And we then start likening that feeling to being in love or to feeling connected. And when we're peaceful with someone, it almost feels awkward or it feels boring. And it's just because we're not trained to understand the value of peace. But in all the work that you do and all the work that I'm thinking about, it's like, I know that when I'm at my most still and my most peaceful, that's when I'm most connected, when I feel most aligned and centered. Obviously not when you're running around. I'm just thinking out loud about that idea of how people can notice the power of things we've not been trained to notice, right? We've been trained by movies and music to be trained to see speed and impulse and immediacy as attractive and cool and beautiful and powerful. But then if you think about when someone pauses before they speak, like there's so much presence in that, and it's peaceful. When you see someone reflecting or thinking, it's peaceful. When you find yourself feeling sure about something, it's not impulsive, it's peaceful. But we've just not been trained to appreciate peace in that way or stillness in that way. And therefore, when it comes about, it starts to feel boring or complacent or lazy or just kind of a bit awkward, I think, is probably the best word that people experience it through.
I love what you're saying. It resonates so deeply with me. One of the things that I've learned so much about through all the readings and from always being connected with the other side is about how to live in the here and now. And I think that peace is underrated. It absolutely is. And we're not taught to pay attention to it, right? I think our society and our world's like, be aggressive, go out and do this, woo-hoo-hoo. Be noticed, blaze trails. And I think there's great energy around that too, right? Creators and being creative and change agents of the world and doing all that is phenomenal. But all of us are multifaceted within ourselves. And if we don't create space to honor the peace within ourselves, our own beings, we're not going to know how to identify and honor it in our relationships with others, right? And as I've, grown and because every time I read, I'm a student and I'm learning too. I've learned the importance of peace, and that peace comes in a very calm way. Like a lot of times people say to me, how can I tell the difference between psychic information and anxiety? And I say,
that's a great question.
I'm like, well, anxiety is like the opposite of peace, right? And if you have anxious thoughts of fearful things happening, that is anxiety. Like that's fear. That's fear generated from the monkey mind. Because if you get information that's going to help you avoid a situation or inform you about a situation coming up, it's not going to come through in a frightening way. It's going to come through in a very neutral, almost like peaceful knowing, right? So it's like learning to release anxiety and go into that state of peacefulness. And I think a really great question everyone can ask him or herself is, what brings me peace? Because the answers might surprise you. And I think a lot of times people have trouble getting quiet within themselves, which is why I'm a big advocate of journaling or writing. Because I think when we write, we start talking to our inner self and things start coming out of us that we never thought we would even think or say. And it reflects back to us what's really going on. So just sitting down and doing a really quick activity, like sit down and for maybe 1 minute, write what brings you peace. And you can go into it going, I have no idea what brings me peace, but watch what you end up writing, and I think a lot of times it's going to be about what we do for others or how we create sacred space or honor our own light. One of the things I love that you were saying about your trust starts at 0, I think that's so important. And it's not mean. It's actually honoring your own light. Like, we are all light beings, and so many of us don't respect and honor that part of ourselves. We like give it away. We just disrespect it. We need to know that we have inherent value, that we are loving beings, worthy of love. That's our birthright of our souls coming here. But honoring that part of ourselves where we also wait and find people who are also light seekers, people of the light, people who are respectful, I think is really, really important. You know, I just wanted to revisit that because I was so moved by what you said about that. I think it's so important. And the different levels of trust, right? Kind of matches the different levels of love, if you will, right? And I think trust and love go hand in hand. And I think the greatest kind of love has a peace in it. So these are things we might not usually think of when we think of love, right? We think of love and how the media will portray it. It'll be like, dozens of red roses, romance, this, that. But you know what? Sometimes love is an elderly couple walking hand in hand on the beach, not talking, or somebody being at somebody's bedside, helping them go home, cross to the other side because they love them. You know, it's doing for others when they can't do for us. And love is so much more powerful than just romantic love. And I think when we get into our relationships that maybe start with infatuation and are very romantically based, I think the really powerful, beautiful thing that can grow there is this unconditional love, or love that goes in all directions, but that has peace inherently in it. And yes, I agree. I think when you're in a relationship that there's a certain level of peace, you're like, wait a minute, am I missing something?
Yeah.
Like, where's all like the pizzazz,
drama,
and shouldn't I be feeling drama and these intense emotions? And maybe if you're feeling peace in a relationship, you've just hit one of the highest levels possible. And instead of celebrating that, you're going, wait, what's wrong here? I think we need a date night. You know what? No, maybe you just need to sit quietly and not say anything to each other, or just project gratitude towards that person that you're in each other's lives. You know, it's really beautiful. I also think it's a great thing to write people love notes. And I don't even mean this in a romantic way. I mean, when we think back over our lives of people who have lit us up or had an important moment on our path, or maybe just made us happy that week, take a moment and literally write to that person and say, now we can text, right? We have cell phones, there's no excuses, but you can do an old school handwritten letter too. I just want to let you know how much that meant to me when you said this to me. Or when I was in 4th grade and you told me this about myself, I never told you how important that was, but it was. Maybe it's a family member. We want to say, thank you so much for making me feel seen 7 years ago when I told you this. Whatever it might be, I think the more that we celebrate those loving relationships in our lives, we honor them, it makes our whole vibration rise, right? And it creates this climate of like kindness and love and gratitude. I think gratitude's so important. And I think feeling gratitude for the people we are privileged enough to love this lifetime is so important.
Yeah. How important are tangible signs? Like, there's obviously people talk about patterns in seeing hummingbirds, numbers, like physical signs. Like, how important is it for people to find those, discover those, notice those? And a follow-up question to that is, actually, I'll save it because we both, yeah, let's start there.
Let's talk about signs and how important signs are. Signs are important because they can transform your life, like in extraordinary ways. I always say to people, listen, you don't have to believe what I'm saying about what I've learned about us being loved and guided and watched over. Why don't you just open up and try and experience it yourself and make it tangible? I mean, we are stuck here right now. I mean, stuck, but I don't, right? Our souls chose to be here in this materialistic world right now. Being here is a gift. But we are in the materialistic world, and there's all sorts of energy around us that's unseen, that's there, that we pick up on, that we don't have tangible proof of. So why not marry the two? Why not ask the other side, or teams of light, the universe, to send us tangible signs so that we can see proof and glimpses of that connection? And it will happen. There's a language around us at all times that has been guiding us, showing us, teaching us. But the great thing is we can open to it and expand on it at all times. Whenever I've learned a foreign language, language, I've always gotten thrilled every time I learned a new word because now I could communicate more readily, right? So when we create a language of signs with our team of light, with the universe, and we ask to be guided by that, and we ask to be shown evidence that we are watched over, that everything happens, for us on our path and so forth, or that maybe a loved one is around us, still present, that love continues after bodily death. We ask for a sign of that. It can change our lives in extraordinary ways. And I say, there are default signs that our team of light has been sending us, or the universe has been sending us since forever. And then there is also a language we can open up to. So the default signs are pretty interesting. A lot of times, the other side will like to manipulate electrical devices. So back in the day, flickering lights, they'll still do that. Or a lot of times now that we have, iPhones, they love changing when we're texting someone, changing words there. They will love putting things in our social media feeds, like articles, all sorts of things, information. They'll still, turn the TV off now and then to let you know they're around. They like to put coins in our path, pennies, dimes, nickels. Why? Well, I think it's very easy when we are in a form of state of energy to kind of manipulate small metallic objects. But then they like to also guide creatures into our path. And I've found something here. It's always creatures that navigate the world using electromagnetic fields. Again, these unseen energy fields all around us. So birds, butterflies, deer, dragonflies, ladybugs, bat, fox, they will put them in our path to kind of get our attention and be like, hello, there's something more going on here. We're with you, etc. But we can ask for anything we want. A lot of times the universe too will send us signs in numbers. Like, I am not a math person. I taught high school English for 20 years. I'm all about literature and energy and connection, but I have great respect for math. And it has been taught to me from the other side that the whole way this kind of materialistic paradigm works is through sacred geometry. Math matters. They're a language of itself. And so a lot of times the universe will send us mathematical signs. For some people, it might be the number 1111 or 444 or 222. Some people have very specific numbers that have followed them their whole lives. Some people have numbers that just feel good to them. They can't explain it. It just feels good. So the universe speaks to us through numbers too. But we can open that dialogue. Again, intention is the most important thing, saying, listen, I'm open and I'm ready for this language of signs. Please send them to me, guide me. But we don't want to just say, send me the signs. Because yes, the other side will establish signs with us, our guides, God energy, loved ones who have crossed will sometimes send us signs of things that they were known for, but we can open it and expand it and ask for specific things. So we can say, hey, I'd like the number 222 from now on when I'm on path and I'm on my highest path and I'm doing the right thing. We can ask for songs as a great way to connect, send me this song. And sometimes our loved ones on the other side will send songs that they were known for too. They'll play with it back and forth. We can ask for creatures. We don't have to just ask for creatures that navigate the world with electromagnetic fields. We can say, send me and pick something really different. Like I used to ask my guides for monarch butterflies and I was like, that's too easy. I'm going to start asking for aardvarks, armadillos, and anteaters. Because then my monkey mind will have to pay attention when I get that. Because of course we want to dismiss when we get signs. We're like, send me another sign so that I know that was a sign. And then we get it. And then we're like, send me one more sign and I promise this time I'll believe that it's a sign, right? So our monkey mind's always wrestling with it. So when we ask for kind of outlandish things, we have to pay attention when we start getting them. So when I get aardvarks, armadillos, anteaters in the most extraordinary ways, usually when I'm just thinking to the other side a question, or is this in my highest path to do, or it could be when I'm having a challenging day or celebrating something, I'll get my sign, right? We can ask them for anything we want, but I always say change it a little. Don't just ask for like an elephant, ask for a purple elephant. We can ask for phrases too, can be a great thing. Ask for a phrase and just be open to the language, be open to recognizing when the other side is talking back to us. I think it can transform our lives. It can help us find our highest paths. It can help us know unequivocally that we are not alone and that we are part of this great fabric of existence and that our paths are intertwined with other people's journeys and paths in ways that we can't fathom. Nobody gets to understand the impact of their spiritual self while they're here. When we cross and we do, this life review, where in an instant, we're able to see not only the choices we made, but feel and see how it impacts other people's paths. It's mesmerizing, but we don't get to know it when we're here. We just have to kind of trust that we're doing it. How do we trust we're on our highest path? Well, using a currency of forgiveness, kindness, gratitude, love, those things.
And I love the way you're speaking about how it's so different for everyone. And you're so right. Like we all second guess signs because we've been so conditioned to not believe in the, subconscious. So
100%.
there's a part of us that's skeptical and cynical, even when, like you said, you get a sign, you're like, show me another one, show me another one, show me another one. And you rightly pointed out, that's that monkey brain. How do you know when, let's say it's a sign you haven't asked for, how do people know when it's a warning versus a positive? Or how do they know when it's like, hey, I'm telling you to slow down versus, oh, this is on the right path? Is that a language that you have to create and build? Or is that something that you're learning to listen to more closely?
Well, I think it's learning to listen to more closely, but at the same time, you are building it every time you do that, right? It's honoring it in the proper way. So if something gets our attention as a sign, and we're like, wait, what does that mean? I think the impetus will be like, oh, let me call a psychic medium and ask what that sign means. And that's not what you need to do. You actually just need to get quiet within yourself and you ask your team of light, can you explain to me what that meant? Can you show me something else to guide me with that? Or can you let me feel what that means? And we will have a sense of, oh, this is helping you avoid this, or this is leading you to something. The answer is within ourselves all the time. So all of us have the answers within ourselves. Our problem is we can't quiet ourselves in order to access that part. We don't create space for that. We're always looking to get the answers elsewhere when it's all right there. So if this is what I always say to people, if you got something that you think was a sign, it was a sign. You don't need to get validated by a psychic medium to know it was a sign. If you have that moment where your thoughts, your energy is like, is that a sign? It is. It means they've gotten your attention and you've recognized it. Can you imagine like the hoops and the things that they jump through to get us these amazing signs in the exact moments, and then we get them and we're like, I think that was a sign, but you know what? I'm going to reject it.
Yeah.
What we do, so when we honor it, and the greatest thing you can do when you get a sign is to tell somebody about it, because then they know and you honor it, and you're also sharing that energy with others, and you're helping open up other people to their signs, right? It's this great chain of light and connection. So I think that the answers are always within us as to what the sign means. Yeah. And if you got something that you think is a sign, it is a sign. Yeah. But what I will tell you is the way the other side works is they do not dwell in fear and they do not use fear. If I ever am doing a reading for somebody or somebody gets a certain sign, it's not to scare them that something bad's going to happen or this or that. It's to guide them or prepare them or let them know, listen, I'm right here with you. You're not alone when you go through this, or we're here with you, right? Sometimes we'll get signs just so that we know we're being loved and supported through whatever it is we're going through. It's not that the other side has this magic wand that can be like, okay, we're going to help you avoid this thing that your soul signed up to go through so that you would grow and learn and understand, right? They're not going to wave that magic wand and stop that from happening, but they're going to be right by our side the whole time being like, you got this. We love you. We're with you. You're so precious. You are so important, right? And having that knowing within ourselves is the most important thing. So it's like getting our spiritual self on, reconnecting in that way and trusting that we have the answers ourselves. And if we just get quiet, we can hear it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went into the clarity of that, because I think for so many people, they think that fear or that anxiety is a sign. And to know that that's not how the universe communicates in that frequency, I think is a really clear line for people to draw. Yeah. Because I think often we think we're sensing things, but most of them are based on worry, anxiety, or stress or pressure.
And that's a very real thing. And I think the stimulus that is out there in our world, it perpetuates that. It's like the snowball effect of anxiety. The other thing is too, just being an energy reader in the world, which we all are, we pick up on other people's anxiety and energy, and it snowballs for us. Yeah. Listen, I'm a psychic medium and I get really bad anxiety sometimes, especially with my 3 kids, right? I'll be like, but what if this happens? What if this happens? And I have learned to understand that fear is a liar, that anxiety is a liar. And so when I get these moments of chattery anxiety, I take a step back energetically. I ground myself within my own life. It's like grounding myself in my own being, right? And I say this to myself, actually, everything is working out for me. And I just leave it, because it silences the anxiety immediately, because it reminds me that I am guided, I am loved, I am protected, and that I'm never alone. Yeah. And I think it's so important for us not to feed into our anxiety cycles, right? And some behaviors can help unplug from that too, right? Maybe turn off the news. Maybe go, like, even if you're not an artist, I'm going to label that way, like a professional artist, go engage in art, because art is being connected with God, right? God is this force of creation and love, those two things. And so whenever we do art, we are being godlike. We are tapping into that godlike energy. I think the mistake we make here is thinking, oh, we need to be an expert artistically in this to do it. No, it's the act of creating and doing art that rebalances us and connects us to something so much greater than ourselves. So if you're feeling anxious, go do something artistic. Whether that means listening to a song you like and just really listening to it, or if it means going and doodling whatever comes out of you, even if it's like chicken scratch and you wouldn't show it to anybody, you've now done it. It's going to recenter and rebalance your energy and try and release that anxiety.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that as well, because I was about to say that, and I want everyone to remember this, you don't have to sit still to experience stillness.
Yes.
You can experience stillness while running, whilst driving, whilst painting, whilst journaling. Stillness doesn't mean not moving, right? And I think we have that belief that
to make that distinction.
Yeah, like my conversations with myself or my conversations with the universe mostly happen while I'm driving on my own. Like that's just a place I feel very comfortable to have conversations or to have discussions or to have reflection and think about things and talk it out. It just works for me. And I know a lot of people who do it while swimming or while running or, whatever it may be. And so I want people to also understand that when we're saying sitting still, yes, meditation is a beautiful tool and technique. And yes, I do recommend if you can sit with your thoughts for 20 minutes a day, it's a beautiful thing to do. But I think there are other ways of finding stillness that include movement.
Yeah. So this concept, I love what you're saying of being still within yourself. To me, it's also about like connecting, right? Connecting with your spiritual self. And it's so interesting to me, the list you just gave, because it's so characteristic, right? Driving is one of the main ways that we disengage from the frontal lobe, because our body is doing rote things. And so we are distracted and we can get the psychic downloads. We can get that connection. What you're calling stillness is that state of connection, right? It's so magical. Another way, taking showers, people get it. Swimming, running and exercising gets you into that state of connection too. A lot of times athletes, writers, musicians, artists, people will describe it using the same exact word. They say, I don't know, I was just in the flow. So being in the flow is also like being connected in that state of stillness and then in the outside world. It doesn't mean you're sitting still. It means you're in a state of spiritual connection, right? It is there for us at all times. You could be at a loud, chattery party and you can be still within. It's just going into yourself, knowing and feeling that. And it is something you can feel. Some people I think like to work with different exercises to be able to feel that. And some of them will use like chakra points or meridian points to really feel that energy coming in. And those are all wonderful tools of exploration people can do. But you can even do it when you're out grocery shopping, getting into that state of stillness, getting into that moment within yourself where you're connecting to, some people like to call it your higher self. Some people, I call it my team of light, God, universe, whatever you want to call it. The word doesn't matter. Being in that state of being does. And you are always in your highest flow when you're doing that. And you're always going to be guided on your highest path when you get calm and you trust that.
As a medium, you obviously interact with people on the other side. And I wanted to know how is that transformed your view of grief and loss?
Yeah, it's transformed it completely. And it is such a gift and a blessing. So often I meet people after they've crossed. I'll be told, oh yeah, I know that person. Oh, well, I actually met him through after he crossed or whatever that might be. It's magical because here's the thing. I think in this materialistic world, which by the way, this materialistic paradigm has been blown to smithereens for over 100 years scientifically, but nobody's talking about it, right? So we're still pretending what you see is what you get and that's it, right? Meanwhile, none of us are solid beings. Like we're not solid, the chairs are not solid, we're just fast vibrating atoms that are appearing solid, right? Get to the quantum level, it gets really fascinating. That's a whole rabbit hole we could have a whole other conversation about. But here's what I have learned through all the readings I've done. These physical bodies, you can think of it like, when you get in your car and you drive somewhere and then you've gotten where you need to be and you get out of the car and you're still going, but the car's there. You don't even think about the car probably. That's our soul and our physical body. We come back here with soul groups, right? And we come back here and we find people in our soul groups. A lot of times we have spiritual contracts to work together. But here's the thing, death is not a dead end, it's a doorway. And it's a doorway back to our true home and to something greater than we can understand with these little brains we have, which to me are really like dunce caps that keep us from remembering where our true home is, why we're really here, all of those things, right? And so love is the most powerful thing there is, and that is the cord of connection always. And every time I'm reading for somebody and connecting with somebody on the other side and they're sitting here, oh my gosh, the feeling I get of feeling that love go through me, it's like being allowed to go to lunch with those people who love each other so much and being able to feel it as well. It's such a magnificent gift. But what's become very, very apparent to me is that love cannot be broken. When we have love for somebody, that is always this cord of light connection that is there. And here's the thing, relationships don't end upon bodily death. I've actually seen them get stronger after somebody's transitioned. Let's say there was somebody here on earth and their loved one on the other side. Maybe it was like a challenging relationship in some ways. Well, the person crosses, goes to the other side, does their life review, and now understands things in totally new ways. A lot of times will apologize, take responsibility for things they couldn't hear, things that there was no way I could know, right? Really specific things where the sitter is like, this is absolutely my dad coming through, and wow, this is real, and wow, I actually don't ever need Laura to talk to him. This love and forgiveness, this relationship is ongoing. And what's more is I can ask him to send me signs as tangible proof that this is real, he's still present. And it changes how people live in the here and now because they realize, and it changes, I think, their grief journey. Listen, there's no shifting the physical loss. Do we love hugging each other? Are we physical beings right now? Yes, and we want that physical touch and ability to, hear someone's voice. But when somebody transitions to the other side, they're still very present and loving us. They just don't have voice boxes or arms to hug us. They're going to find ways to do that by sending us signs. And so opening up to that language with our loved ones on the other side and saying, show me that you're still present, guide me, asking for a sign and receiving it like 2 minutes later, it becomes an undeniable truth for you. Or asking for it and then getting it on a very special day like your birthday. You just begin to understand that death is not real. It's real in a bodily sense, but there is something so much greater that comes after. And here's the part where I love to tell people to start looking into and reading literature on studies of people who have had near-death experiences, what they've seen, children who have past life recall, deathbed visions of people talking about their loved ones and their relatives in the room with them right before they cross, who had died years before. All of it validates the other information. I remember reading this study of somebody who was going through an operation, had cardiac arrest, saw all the surgeons, heard what they were saying, zoomed up and out, and as they were leaving, they had like clairvoyant vision. Their vision, they saw a red sneaker like wedged in like the top of the roof of the hospital, and then they were in cardiac arrest, I think. They restarted their heart, jumped back in their body. And when they woke up from this operation the next day, they're like, oh yeah, I had this experience and there was this red shoe there. So they sent the custodial staff up, and sure enough, you couldn't see this with the human eye anywhere. And this is way back before drones existed. There was the red shoe exactly where they said. How can we explain that? How can we explain any of these things? Our existence is so much more mysterious and miraculous and guided than we can fathom. We are so watched over. We are so loved. We are so inherently important to the people we meet and the people we're connected to. And that is what the other side has taught me. That is what people who have crossed have taught me. They have talked to me too about what they're most proud of in the things that they have done here in the world. And a lot of times it's like what they did for others that is still reverberating. One of the things I love is that people who have crossed will talk about things that their loved ones are doing in their name and the here and now. Anytime somebody raises money in someone's name, let's say they run a marathon, guess what? Your loved one's right there with you, and they're going to find signs and ways to show you. If we go, let's say we have somebody on the other side who crossed and it's their birthday, and we go to the ice cream store and we're like, here's, $20, whoever the next people buy it, tell them it's on like this person's name. Like that person's still allowed to be connected to this beautiful chain of light and goodness here on earth. So I think it's really beautiful to embrace this understanding that our relationships don't end with bodily death. We do need to communicate in a new way, but you don't need somebody else to access that for you. You don't need to go to a psychic medium to talk to, your grandma on the other side. You just have to get quiet within yourself, link up, set your intention, ask your team of light for help, and start creating a language of signs back and forth, because you're going to get them and you're going to see. I always say when I do sessions with people, and I love it and it's very sacred to me, and I'm not dismissing the power of that and how beautiful it is. But I'm always saying, like, you don't need me. It's like if you and your loved one wanted to go out to lunch and I'm like, hi, I'm going to come along, but you can't talk to each other. You have to pass the messages back and forth through me. You don't need that. You don't need me ever, right? So we can learn how to do this on our own. And I think if people are unsure, but they're willing to test it and start creating a language of signs, I think they're going to be blown away by what happens. And it's a very interpersonal thing where you try to explain the sign you got to somebody else, and it's like, I can't even explain how amazing this was and what happened. But
there were a couple of things that stood out to me while you were talking. I read this book years ago. It was by Ian Stevenson called Old Souls.
Yes.
And so if anyone hasn't read that, I highly recommend it. If you're interested in out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, or past life memories, I think he, across his time and his research, he talks about at least 2,000 to 3,000 cases of all three of those.
Yes.
And that book is such a great resource and, such a great thing to look at if you're fascinated by that. And there's so many examples like you gave with the red shoe in there.
Oh, there's so many great books on this too. That's why I say to ask the other side to lead you to the right books, because that's how you can learn so much. I think he worked at a University of Virginia's consciousness lab, which is still ongoing. There's just so much research coming out of there. It's really phenomenal.
And that was the one thing. And the other thing that came out was, I love this idea of how when someone passes on, your relationship can actually strengthen with them rather than weaken with them. And I love that just as an idea and as a concept, let alone the fact that it can actually work in the way you're saying it. And I think our relationship with the death, I think what you're saying is that our relationship with death changes when we recognize that it's not the end and that it's a doorway.
100%.
And it's almost like that's one of the things, again, talking about things that have been hidden in the world. I think death is one of those topics that's hidden.
Right.
It's a subject matter that's hidden.
It's almost taboo.
It's
and
taboo.
It shouldn't be. And it's ironic, right? Because it's the one absolute for all of us.
Yeah.
You think we'd be exploring this more. And the other thing is we all have people we love, animals we love who have crossed. We all are going to have to deal with grief in some way. Why are we not talking about this? Why are we not exploring this concept, right?
Almost everything we've talked about today is it can, like everything in the world, this can be so beautiful and wonderful, and it can also become an addiction and a crutch and a kind of, if done in an unhealthy way. So if someone's obviously doing this from a place of trust instead of a place of fear, we know that's a healthy relationship with your signs, with your team of light, etc. But for someone else, often what I find, there may become a over-dependency out of fear or an addiction to trying to figure all this out all the time out of insecurity or fear, not out of trust. And I think with anything in the world, we see that. Anything in the world, if done through trust, can be beautiful. And anything in the world, even if it's really good for you, even meditation done through fear, is not going to have the same result. So how do you encourage people to constantly tune into the healthy version of what this can look like and maybe not get caught up in the constant worrying and the checking that often leads to their curiosity in the first place?
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? Because I can see how you could go down a lower vibrational path with this. And the way that I could see that happening is thinking you need others to validate your experiences or to get the answers from, rather than having this sense of calmness and knowing that the answers are within you and that you are hardwired to the other side yourself and can receive guidance in that way, right? So I'd be wary of trying to search for things through other people rather than through the vehicle of your own heart and being. One thing I just wanted to comment on too, where you said relationships can strengthen when people are on the other side. What people on the other side tell me is what they love is being able to be present always and be in more than one place at more than one time with people they love, that they're not limited to, their own physical bodies in the way that it was. But getting back to the fear path with all of this, there's dark energy and there's light energy. And I think we can all feel the difference. And I think, I always work in the light. When you work in the light too, I think that you don't concern yourself with, I guess I'd say ego in a sense. And I mean that for everybody who is opening and embracing this too, because the ego will play on your fear. The ego will say, I'm such a fool for trying to believe in this or testing this, or what if I tell somebody this and they're going to make fun of me, or I don't have the power myself to do this. I need to go get answers from somebody, or whatever that might be. I think letting go of that and just taking some deep breaths in, because I think breathing will always connect us with our soul. It's what the other side has told me, makes our soul click into our body is when we're born and we take the first breath, right? And when our soul leaves is when our breath stops. Sometimes a little bit before. That's actually, sometimes they talk to me about that. A lot of times if we have a traumatic death, we actually leave earlier. But I think that when we breathe, we can dispel the fear. So if we're starting to feel like focusing on something, it's funny, like when you talked about infatuation, I think that can happen with lots of things, not just love, right? So getting infatuated with this, like, I need all the answers now to my life. I need to know this. Like, I think it's very important to take a deep breath in and be calm and know that the answers will be given to you in divine timing. There have been times too where I've read for people, or even on my own path, where I've gotten certain information and I'm very aware that I'm not meant to know more until a certain time. And that might be because I need to experience a lesson for myself or whatever it is. But surrendering to that, I think, is important.
That's peace, though. That's peace. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's such a beautiful relationship with this art form to have, because it's what I often feel like we're so addicted to the answers, or wanting to get the answers, that we don't know if we ever put in a sincere request. Right. It's almost like you're at a restaurant and you're like, where's my order? Where's my order? And then you realize you forgot to place the order and you didn't order it in this sense. It's not an order in this sense. It's a request or a seeking. But I feel like if our energy and effort goes into a sincere, genuine effort to ask, to request, to seek with authenticity and peace, then we can have a chance to listen and hear. But if the request is coming in as a demand or as a order or as a kind of, aggressive expression, then chances are it is harder for us to listen to and receive what may come from the universe, or whatever we may call it. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very different vibration, right? Yeah. About like demanding versus trusting. Mm-hmm. And I think that in order to get into our own light energy, into the flow of that light, there is a certain surrender that has to take place. And that's very uncomfortable for most of us because we like to micromanage things. We also think we're go-getters, so we need to go get it or we're not going to get it. What I've learned is like there is divine timing in everything. And the greatest lessons I've learned, because I'm always in a state of connection, and you'd think I'd have a really great advantage. Like, oh, do I get to know my whole life path and everything that's going to happen? No, I get to know moments or glimpses, and then I'll be given more, and then I'll be blinded at times completely, and I'll be told by my guides, like, you're blinded on purpose. This is a pop quiz for you. Here you go. I've always respected that. But I think it would be very easy to get into the mindset of crossing my arms, stomping my feet, and being like, this is not fair. Why don't I have access to this information? There's so much going on for every single person's life journey, and by that I mean soul journey, that we can't understand. I think if we trust in it, we don't have to be happy about it sometimes. Let's say things aren't going the way we want. We need to trust that we're being guided, that it's going to unfold for us. That here's what I like to tell people whenever I read for them or whenever I meet them, and this is the truth. You are right exactly where the universe wants you for this exact moment in time. You are not off path. And that might mean that they're in this exact moment of having this incredible opening for change and growth, or that they've worked really hard and this is their rising moment, or they're about to meet somebody that's going to transform their life, or they're about to do some really hard inner work, or they're about to have an epiphany, or they're about to connect their own self to their spiritual self and their life is going to transform. But nothing about any person's life is an accident. And anybody who listens to this, you are exactly where the universe wanted you to be at this exact moment right now. It's what comes next. How are you going to open your energy? What are you going to learn to recognize? Because here's the thing. When you start seeing signs, when you start seeing in this connection between all things, and when you start using a currency of gratitude and love and forgiveness and kindness, your world transforms. And when you start seeing you can never unsee it. And you have to surrender to the fact that, oh, there is a path. And sometimes your journey is part of someone else's journey that you've agreed to do. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable leg of the journey, but you're missing the perspective of understanding the beautiful chords of light you're creating, or how you're helping that person's soul, that maybe your soul and that person's soul had a contract that you were going to come here and do that for them, or be a catalyst for them to do something. It's when you start viewing your life in that way, it becomes extraordinary. That everybody you meet you're either a lesson for them, they're a lesson for you, or they're a moment on your path that's getting you in the right place in the right time for the next thing to come. Nothing is accidental.
Laura, thank you so much for your time and energy today. I'm so grateful we got to do this, and I learned so much, honestly. And I know that everyone who's listening and watching, I'm hoping that they're going to be fine-tuning and becoming more aligned with themselves as well. And again, of course, I want to remind everyone that you can read both of Laura's books, Signs, The Secret Languages of the Universe, and then The Light Between Us, Stories from Heaven, Lessons for the Living. Both of those books, we'll put the links in our caption to both of them. Laura, we end every On Purpose episode with a final 5. These questions have to be answered in 1 word to 1 sentence maximum. And Laura Lynn Jackson, these are your final 5. So the first question is, what is the best advice you've ever heard or received?
I think that it's be true to yourself.
And the second question is, what is the worst advice you've ever heard or received?
That's a tough one. Be competitive.
Why do you think that's bad advice?
Well, I think the worst code game we ever play is musical chairs. This sense that, there's a dearth. You have to get this when somebody else can't. You have to get this over somebody. I think that being competitive with others is never the answer. And I think being competitive with yourself is fine. Like driving yourself to be better and better and better. But I think the mindset of there's not enough, be competitive, steal it from the next person, do this, have power over. This is way more than a 1-word answer, right?
No, I asked you to expand.
It's that sort of advice that I think sets us off the wrong way. So don't have your kids play musical chairs,
That's I actually really like that parallel. I've always said that it's really interesting how we live in a world where there's a finite number of seats in the theater, or seats in the stadium, or seats in musical chairs, but happiness is infinite. Like there's no limit, but we're so trained in this limited mindset of thinking of, oh my gosh, there's only that many VIP seats, there's only that many seats, there's only that many standing, there's only this many, and that idea of there's only is where I think that competitive point. I love that. That's beautiful. All right, question number 3. What's the best thing to do first thing in the morning and last thing at night to stay aligned with our...
This is such an easy answer for me. It's just express gratitude.
Both morning and night.
Both morning and night. It's the last thing I do at night. It's the first thing I do in the morning. And it shifts your energy completely.
I agree. Fully agree. Question number 4. When you feel like you're completely not in the right place at the right time, what do you say to yourself?
I say things are always working out for me. And by that I mean, we might have a very myopic view of how things seem to us in that moment, but there is usually a much greater reason, and that we are being guided and loved by forces that we can't maybe see, and we have to trust in that. And I think it shifts you out of like an angry, bitter, forgotten mindset into understanding that you are connected to all things and that you're here for a reason.
Beautiful. And 5th and final question, if you could create a law that everyone in the world had to follow, what would it be?
It would be kind.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura. It's been so wonderful talking to you today. And I hope everyone who's been listening or watching, make sure you share your best parts of the episode. If you cut them up for Instagram or TikTok, I love seeing all the clips that you put out there. I would love to make sure that you tag me and Laura with the clips, with the moments that really stood out to you, parts you're going to practice, maybe your own stories of signs and moments in your life where you've had these experiences. If you need a safe space, please do share them with us. I'd love to be there. And thank you so much for your trust and love for On Purpose. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor being in the light of you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, if you loved that conversation, go and check out my episode with the world's leading therapist, Lori Gottlieb, where she answers the biggest questions that people ask in therapy when it comes to love, relationships, heartbreak, and dating. If you're trying to figure out that space right now, you won't want to miss this conversation.
If it's a romantic relationship, hold hands. It's really hard to argue. It actually calms your nervous systems. Just hold hands as you're having the conversation. It's so lovely.